Слава Ленинской коммунистической партии Советского Союза, вдохновителю и организатору всех наших побед. Ура!
The world was forever changed when they emerged. Speaking perfect Russian. And in your own words, Conrad, what happened next?
In the winter of 1985, amidst the dust-choked valleys of Afghanistan, history as we know it changed irrevocably. What began as a routine patrol for Soviet soldiers became an encounter with the impossible, a discovery that would redefine humanity's place in the galaxy. What seemed like a crashed Soviet fighter or some kind of satellite or probe visually did not match the design language of anything NATO or the Warsaw Pact could have fashioned themselves, as it seemed more like what one might find in those American comics about the caped Kryptonian. Soviet infantry approached the wreckage cautiously, their movements mirroring the all-too-familiar assaults on the Mujahideen in the last few weeks. The craft lay embedded in the arid rocky terrain, its surface glinting with an otherworldly sheen under the dim Afghan sun, with the sparks of its broken chassis reacting with whatever current was flowing through it haphazardly. As the soldiers secured the perimeter, rifles trained on the unknown, it became clear that this was no downed air support or stray Western reconnaissance craft, but a silhouette whose manufacturing origins were most likely from the pages of an H.G. Wells novel. Word of the discovery travelled swiftly up the chain of command, each level passing the message on with a growing unease. Initial confusion turned to shock as high-ranking officers confirmed from the grainy photographs taken on site this was identifiably not human technology. Orders came down from the very top: secure the site at all costs. Trucks in the dead of night were brought in under the cover of the darkness, with the familiar crests of the homeland's KGB, and the craft, along with its contents, were loaded under heavy guard. The soldiers, sworn to threateningly implied silence, were now part of an operation that defied explanation. The mission was shrouded in secrecy, with orders clear. The soldiers were to escort the craft intact to Soviet soil without delay, under the highest security and discretion. The murmurs of confusion within the unit eventually faded out with compliance. Driving under convoy through the Kazakh Kizloda region and bundled into the secure grounds of the Baikonur Cosmodrome, an aircraft hangar was swiftly converted into a large laboratory that more resembled a portable gulag than investigative science. Within the wreckage, now laid out neatly with its debris in the center, lay the largest section, an unopened central compartment that was no larger than the front of a heavy goods vehicle. As the engineers cleared away mechanical detritus, what seemed to be a hatch appeared behind the much destroyed front. They turned to the brute muscles of the soldiers, who employed all manners of tools to force it open. Upon their eventual success, a startled figure moved away from the door inside. Familiar, yet distinctly foreign, it emerged and shyly greeted them in flawless Russian. What seemed to resemble a mix of some kind of the most random terrestrial animals with dashes of reptiloid, simian, and avian, this bipedal being shielded itself from the glare of the intense spotlight now aiming at its face. After several minutes of confusion, shock, and bewildered mutterings around the circle, The Soviets lowered their weapons when they could see this visitor was not interested in intimidation. The being was escorted cautiously, if not hurriedly, to a holding cell, as the officers, their hearts still beating intensely, debated how to proceed. The scientists analyzed the technological remains. They uncovered a wealth of new understandings of energy, its distribution and utilization. On the social front with the alien, officers attempted to interrogate it for its origins, which it did not surrender, giving very specific responses and blanket refusals as if running off a script. After a grueling few days, the visitor agreed to speak to them, if it was given permission, as clearly this event had been practiced for. The alien was given a moment to access a radio, with which it spoke a sequence into, on the right frequency, and a voice came back with as much cryptic linguistics as had been entered. The alien, now released from silence, sat down with the Soviets again, and began to describe where it had originated from. The society it described had been perfected through centuries of pacifism, meditation and cooperation. To the astonishment of many, the alien civilization's values seemed to align with socialist ideals: equality, shared purpose, and the rejection of excess. Having been observing the Earth since the 1930s, the aliens had been studying human civilization for its own curiosity, as this was also a first contact for them. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the USSR had found ideological kin among the stars. But the truth was far more complicated. It was only a matter of time until the Americans caught wind of this monumental secret, and the Cold War enters a completely new level. It is through the journey of this project that we will uncover the new horizon that man will embark upon, as in the coming months the conversation between one alien scientist and a unit of the Red Army become conversations between General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev and his inner circle, which in turn becomes more conversations in the Oval Office. It was clear that heading forward, both superpowers had to prepare to go equipped into this new operation. Under the personal direction of the General Secretary, then President Gorbachev, the Soviet Union initiated a clandestine endeavor. He spearheaded the Commission for Extraterrestrial Coordination of the Soviet Union, known by its codename Watchtower, comprised of the officers, scientists and soldiers that had met this alien and bore this monumental secret. By this point, discussions with the visitors and further analysis had broken through the seal of absolute secrecy, revealing the broader implications of this encounter that needed to be met by a dedicated force to understand this new frontier, and also protect its existence. Watchtower was tasked with preparing for this newly identified path, studying the anomalies, navigating the challenges of an interstellar dialogue with a non-human polity, and safeguarding the USSR from what Gorbachev calls the threats unimagined. At a time when the Soviet Union teetered on the brink of reform and collapse, this discovery offered both an unprecedented opportunity and a monumental challenge. Gorbachev's vision for Soviet diplomacy evolved, a future where the USSR and the USA, though still divided by ideology, could still attempt to collaborate in navigating this new frontier, even whilst looking over their shoulders at each other.
Trust but verify.
You repeat that at every meeting.
The timeline we all know has been left behind, as the USSR pulls out early from Afghanistan, and Gorbachev's backstage focus on Watchtower's operations and changing of foreign policy allow for watered-down versions of its perestroika and glasnost plans to go unbothered by the staunch communists of the party. And monumentally, the Union would stay together beyond 1991. The United States of America responds to these changes in nuanced ways over the years, and the actions, or rather seeming inaction, of the Republicans to continued Soviet operations fails to elect George H.W. Bush in 1989.
The state of Michigan has just put Michael Dukakis over the top.
And a new political trajectory for America, and indeed the world, begins. As humanity is welcomed to the stars by seemingly well-wishing visitors, Will they bring the Cold War with them, or find something frighteningly worse? And there we have it, comrades. The Cold War espionage with the backdrop of first contact with an alien race. We will revisit the world of Red Contact at some point. There's much to create here.